Valentine, President and CEO of the Nashville Symphony, and I want to thank all of you for being here this morning, and I especially want to thank the Chamber, Ralph Schultz and his team, along with Partnership 2030 for thinking of the Nashville Symphony and the Schermerhorn as a place to host this morning's debate or forum, and really we're thrilled you're all here. I did want to take a moment to say that we have an incredible season lined up this year. I personally believe it is one of the most exciting seasons we've ever put on this stage, and there's literally something for everyone. We start on September 9th with the great Bela Fleck with the orchestra doing something highly unusual for a banjo player. He's going to actually do his rendition of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue in celebration of the 100th anniversary of that piece. And we'll be celebrating that throughout the season. We have appearances by Yo-Yo Ma, Trisha Yearwood, Kristen Chenoweth, and the list goes on and on and on. So I would encourage you to visit our website, come back often, and we'd love to have you here, and we'd love to see you all throughout the year. It's no secret that Nashville is at a crossroads, and we at the Symphony know that really well because a lot of the signs of that abound right outside our building, and every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights we face a lot of challenges. So this is an important mayoral election. We're really pleased to help co-host this event today with the Chamber, and we know that we have two candidates who care deeply about Nashville, and though they may have different approaches and different platforms, I'm personally anxious to hear what they have to say. And so without any further ado, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Lee Blank, Market Executive for Regions Bank and Chairman of Partnership 2030. Lee?
Well, good morning. Thank you all for investing your time. As Alan said, we do have a mayoral election that's coming up, and it's an important one. As Chair of Partnership 2030, I do want to welcome you to our first event in our fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts July 1, so this is our first Partnership 2030 event of the year. And so we're glad to have you here. For those of you who haven't heard, the Research Center at the Chamber recently released two important statistics. First, the Nashville MSA has returned to pre-pandemic population growth levels. And second, the Nashville MSA has also emerged as one of America's fastest growing job markets. We're excited to see the continued growth in our region and grateful for the investment that you and your companies make in Partnership 2030 to ensure its future. We're thrilled to welcome Freddie O'Connell and Alice Rowley to the Schermerhorn Symphony Center. So please welcome me as they make their way to the stage. We know that one of the foundational elements of the Partnership 2030 plan is regional collaboration. The collaboration, our regional economic development partners, business leaders, and mayors is key to maintaining our competitiveness. The region's success is dependent upon the public and private sector participating in this conversation. Now we're going to get on to the event. Each candidate will be given 15 minutes to address the audience. We have Bishoy McHale from the Chamber's Research Center on the front row to help us keep time. You will receive a cue with 3 minutes remaining and again with 30 seconds remaining. Both candidates will address the audience and then we'll take some audience questions. As you enter the beautiful concert hall this morning, you were each given an index card we invite you to write your questions and place them and pass them to the end of the aisle, and Meg and Allie will walk down the aisles to pick them up. And we'll get on with the questions after the comments from our candidates. I would now like to welcome Freddie O'Connell to the podium. Welcome.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is an exciting day to be in the Schermerhorn Symphony Center. I'm a little disappointed we didn't get to select a fanfare with the symphony performers, but that would have been fun too. It feels like just yesterday I was here with Alan Valentine celebrating 75 years of the Nashville Symphony with a performance of Beethoven's Ninth, and it is really special to be in this space to have a wonderful conversation. Earlier this morning, we've spoken already with some of the key investors in the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce's partnership program, and we talked about the importance of regional collaboration. So this is going to be something that a mayor invests deeply in. So my name is Freddie O'Connell. I'm running to be mayor of Nashville. I do think it's important to share a little bit of my own biography. I grew up in Nashville. My parents are still in the house we grew up in on Bowling Avenue in Richland, West End, back when that was an affordable neighborhood in the 1970s. My brother is here in town with us. He now lives in Rhode Island, but he and his kids are here engaged in a very Music City experience. And that's one of the things that I love about being back in my hometown, and couldn't be more excited about participating in our citywide conversation at this level. My mom was a 40-year career teacher. My dad, in addition to being a songwriter, spent most of his career as a federal employee, and they instilled in both me and my brother a sense of the importance of education. I got to go to Aiken Elementary with my brother. We went on to where my mom taught, which was Montgomery Bell Academy for middle and high school. I then went on to Brown University and returned to Nashville to work in the software and technology industry, which I've done for the past 20 plus years. Working for a mix of software and technology companies, startups, all the way up to publicly traded companies. I've started and founded a couple of my own businesses and had the incredibly important and difficult experience of having hire and fire authority multiple times over. 8 years ago, I got elected to Metro Council for the part of the city that we are sitting in right now today. District 19, which has been the economic heart of not just the city, but so much of the state. I'm extremely proud of a track record that has allowed us to preserve our neighborhoods, including looking at specific preservation districts, but also sustaining growth that has meant that we have been the part of the city that has attracted more residents, that has attracted more jobs, that has attracted more overall growth, to the point where our property tax and activity tax efficiencies allow us to sustain fully 12% of Metro's property tax budget, more than 25% of our activity tax budget. It's an incredible capacity that should give the mayor a platform to invest locally in a way that sustains the region. I have a long history, actually, with the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce specifically, and there were some really important moments. My first real opportunity to engage with the chamber was as an appointee of Mayor Dean to what was then the Nashville MTA Board of Directors in 2008. That was followed that same very quickly. We saw how important regional collaboration was, with Denver at the heart of a strong and growing region that had a lot of the elements that we are still seeking to take on today, not the least of which was transit. So we instituted here a model that was already on the ground in Denver, which was a regional caucus of city and county mayors. We stood that up in Nashville with the mayor of Nashville at its heart and center, but we've seen multiple chairs of that mayor's caucus through the years. I expect to reinvest in that mayor's caucus and bring regionalism back to the fore of how Nashville is delivering our very best growth. The other thing we took back home from that trip to Denver was a Transit Alliance for Middle Tennessee, modeled on a successful regional organization up there that looked at how Denver could sustain its growth over a multi-year period. And we still have lessons to learn. The Transit Alliance of Middle Tennessee has presided over a Transit Citizen Leadership Academy. Transit is the largest missing ingredient we have to sustain the growth that we all know we want to see, the best growth that we can possibly have, and it is something we are going to have to invest in. As we look to the future and take the template that we've established for really strong growth that protects neighborhoods in District 19 citywide, it is going to be important to remind ourselves that the job of the mayor is fundamentally to be partner in chief. We have seen the Chamber invest in programs like Nashville for All of Us, where we, in that same year, 2008, 15 years ago, it's hard to imagine how long ago that was now, the Chamber was one of the lead partners in Nashville for All of Us, a movement to ensure that we wouldn't restrict Nashville's diversity and would, in fact, embrace our idea as a welcoming city. It was done in concert with Mayor Dean, who stood up and said, we're not going to be an English-only city. We are going to make sure that our economy is fully inclusive, and that actually set us on what I think has been an arc for the modern era, and the Chamber has been a partner in the inclusive growth since then. As a proud public school parent, I'm raising 2 second-generation Aiken Eagles. We know how important the success of our schools is to future generations. I, from 2014 to 2016, was a member of the Chamber's Education Report Card Committee and got what is a remarkable Chamber-led initiative to allow ordinary Nashvillians to get an immersive deep dive into what is happening in our public schools. This was a great experience. It was full of insights. We got to work with everything from the school leader and teacher retention and recruitment pipeline to seeing what we were doing from an overall education policy standpoint. I will be a mayor who has skin fully in the game. The success of our daughters is dependent on the success of our public school system, and we know that that success must be available to students and families all across Nashville and Davidson County. It's something that I hope we continue to invest in. We know that there are things that cities must do to maintain what it is that we all want, which is quality of life and access to the city, including on an affordability basis. Some of those things are bedrock items. I would put safety in schools there. I worked with Chief Drake when he was Commander Drake at Central Precinct, a key precinct within District 19 for years. I knew then what I know today, that he had all of the characteristics to be we continue to collaborate. It's one of the most important jobs in the city. Dr. Battle has one of the other most important jobs in the city as Director of Schools. Safety in schools will be at the top of my agenda, but then it's important to think about what the 2 most important new projects that a mayor must invest in. The East Bank, now that we know that the Titans Stadium deal is resolved, will be one of the most important things we do. The Titans as an organization will be a pace car for the East Bank. They expect to play in a dome stadium in 2027, and the next mayor will necessarily have to ensure that Metro develops the infrastructure, works as a master developer to ensure that parks and the areas around the stadium are actually supporting the opening of that stadium. And we know what our plan is for everything from housing to industry to retail, and the design of the district and the infrastructure that supports it will be incredibly imperative. I will say too that the conversation that we came back 15 years ago from Denver has not ended. We still, as a major American city, are lacking transit. It will be incredibly important for the next mayor of Nashville to make not just the sustained incremental investments that Mayor Dean did for 7 years that allowed our ridership growth in what was then Nashville MTA and is now WeGo Public Transit to outpace our population growth. That is an important trend. It's one we know is possible. I can tell you from 7 years on that board of directors, it is a thing that if you build it, people will ride, and I expect to resume immediately the conversation about how we secure dedicated funding for transit. I expect to do that with regional partners as we go forward. As a former board member of Cumberland Region tomorrow, and as a former Nashville MTA board member, I already have great relationships with regional city and county mayors, but also the business community in the region that will be necessary to support things. We know we've got a complicated relationship that has emerged over the past few years with the state of Tennessee. This is why, as we have reached this point in the conversation, I have resumed a lot of conversations with particularly Republican state legislative offices to ensure that we have an opportunity to reset and recalibrate a relationship that we know must be a successful partnership. As we go forward, there will be other things on the mayor's agenda that are consequential below the projects of safety in schools, and in addition to the projects of the East Bank and Transit. We have a mall site in Southeast Nashville. We have a capital program for a variety of schools that are going to need upgrades and renovations. And I will say, one of the more important things that the Chamber did in the past few years was an economic study that showed the revenue reality. We know we always have to keep an eye on our debt as a share of operating in our budget, but we also know that the property tax efficiencies we've built over the past several years should give the mayor an incredible platform to continue to make key investments. I don't think it's responsible to make pledges about either debt or revenue, particularly on the property tax piece, because we know from the work of the business community that we can be responsible and still make sure that our government is growing in a way that allows investments to continue sustainably. We are going to need to continue to make capital thing from safety, good repair. I will also say one of the most refreshing things is I don't expect to come into office and put my name or stamp on a whole bunch of new plans. So many of you in this room and so many other Nashvillians have already participated in robust planning processes. We've got a shelf full of good plans. I expect to take a lot of those plans right off the shelf, work with our incredible Metro department heads, and again, as partner-in-chief, so many of you in this room, to ensure that we hit the ground running from day one and start to invest in Plan to Play, which is an incredible program of parks and open space, revisit our Child and Youth Master Plan and update it to include some technological focus, but compare it with our Youth Violence Summit work that is as fresh as 2016, where young people across the city taught us how they expect us to keep them safe. We have in motion, we have a comprehensive transportation plan that Mayor Cooper left us with. He left us with an incredible vision for the East Bank with the East Bank Vision Plan. All of these things now require us as partners to go forward and make them work for this city. I can tell you as someone who, when the city wasn't able to pick up recycling, went out and did it myself. I expect to be a roll-up-your-sleeves mayor who is a distinct problem solver and look to work with so many of you to make these challenges converted into opportunities. This is a moment where Nashville can find a restorative path forward. This is a moment where we can deliver greatness in both schools and education. This is a moment where I think a lot of you have noticed over the past few years that there is a restlessness, that we have been feeling the sensation of being on the wrong track for a little too long, and this is a moment where working together as strong partners, we can deliver the opportunity to have this city come together within 4 years and say, you know what, because of the focused strategic investments we are making, led by the mayor's office, who has returned the era of partner-in-chief, we can end this 4-year period and know that we are back on the right track. This is important too. This is an election. We start early voting in just a couple weeks on August 25th. The election itself is on September 14th. This is a rapid burst of a conversation, and anybody in here who cares about it must show up to vote. We did not conclude our citywide conversation on August 3rd. It will conclude at least this portion of it on September 14th, but in reality, that's just the part where we start the next phase. The next phase will be governing and leading together. I am very grateful for the partnership that I've had with the Chamber through the years. I look forward to making sure that the role of the Chamber in the community is understood, not just within my administration, but within the community at large, and that it's not the only partnership that matters in the city. We're going to have to broaden and deepen some of the relationships that anybody who has spent any time in the city knows are possible. I look forward to being in the mix in those things in a great and deep way. I thank you all for coming today to the Skirmahorn Symphony Center. I know this was not necessarily a romantic prelude to the Music City piece, but I hope you will come back, because some of the problems we have to solve right here in downtown are going to allow season ticket holders to access this space. Those are the kinds of problems that we're going to have to solve together as a city. I look forward to doing that with you all. My name is Freddie O'Connell. I'd be honored to earn your votes, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Freddie. Please make sure you're writing down your questions and getting those. Meg and Allie will be coming down the aisles. I'd like to welcome Alice Rowley to the podium. Thank you.
It is great to be with you, and I enjoyed seeing Alan Valentine just before. When we open our public spaces to more people, Nashville thrives. lives, or that this was their first time. And I would say, Alan, 90% of the hands went up, and it was a beautiful reminder that when we open our public spaces to more Nashvillians, when we think about the programming that brings more voices to the table, we can all succeed. So thank you, everyone who's been a part of building this symphony hall, of supporting the symphony, and for making today possible. I will tell you a little bit about me. You can't read everything you see in the paper, so I'll start. You can hear it right from me. Grew up right here in Nashville on Charlotte Pike. Went to Hume-Fogg High School, a couple of blocks here, the same high school my late grandfather attended. Went on to earn a degree in international relations from Stanford University. And my first job after that was the result of well-intentioned public policy that no one had really thought about how they were going to operationalize it. Sacramento had said it was a great idea to make class sizes 20-1, but nobody said, do we have enough teachers? So a lot of us suited up and went down to Los Angeles Unified Public School System, where I taught high school. I answered another call to serve our country when Lamar Alexander decided to run for the United States Senate. We didn't have a voice at the federal level that was thinking about the needs of parents equally with the needs of systems. And so he chose to run, and I went to work for him, trading 130 kids in my classroom for 50 million kids nationally. And so there's always been this sort of tension, I think, in my career of figuring out how to roll up the sleeves and do the work versus helping shape some policy that might make sense for more people. Met my husband there, who was a doctor in the United States Army, and the United States Army moves and the United States Senate does not. So I went to get an MBA from the University of Virginia at the Darden School, and owned and ran a travel company that I grew to about $25 million in revenues and expanded across 50 countries. So experienced what I think so many people, so many risk takers in this room do, which is understanding you wake up every day and operate in the environment that you have, and you figure out a way to create a solution that benefits more people. Answered another phone call and was fortunate to serve in the early administration of Governor Bill Haslam, working on the economic development plan. I served as an assistant commissioner of strategy. And I mention that because I have always approached the work of regionalism, of how do we do the best for the most people, but how do we do it in a way that restores public confidence and public trust. And then spent about 4 years helping a little company on Music Row here grow from about 55 employees to about 140 employees. It's called Quaver Music, which is why I've spent quite a bit of time in this hall. I mention that because I know there are many business owners that get frustrated, many community leaders that get frustrated when things around zoning and planning don't make sense. And so I do, and I think as mayor, I will draw on those experiences. I have 2 boys. They're 7 and 11 years old. Yesterday was the first day of school for both of them. Both attend different religious schools. One is at Akiva, the Jewish day school, and one is at one of our city's Catholic schools. And I do believe that there are many terrific schools in our city, and I know that many families are back to school and juggling that week, and I know Freddie is too. So why did I choose to run to serve as our city's 10th mayor, and what do I think is really the distinction in this next chapter for our city? The first is making sure that the city government understands probably our 2 most critical issues, both for the business community, but both for the long-term viability of the city. And that first one is our kids' education. Today, Fran Bush, a former Metro Nashville Public School Board member, endorsed our campaign and joined our campaign team. Many folks know that the chair and the treasurer of my campaign is David Fox, a former Metro Schools Board chair. We know, families know, business leaders know that everything begins with our public education system, and that there are many schools that are getting that right in our city, but we know that there's too many schools that were looking the other way. And so our administration will not look the other way. I'm delighted that Fran has joined our team because she helped hire Adrienne Battle. She voted to bring her in to serve our schools. But we all collectively want to make sure that we are creating a governance structure and also an accountability structure, that we are making sure that we are not 94th or 95th of all 95 counties. That is not the Nashville that we need to be. The second aspect, I think, that is most critical for us to work through so that we don't follow a recipe book that we see. I think families see and are a little worried. They're excited Nashville's growing, but they're also worried when they see us take on some things that big cities have done and it's hurt them, and that's namely crime. So our public safety and our city's police force, I believe, just like any other asset, just like recruiting any other world-class economic partner here, I believe that our public safety, our police and our firefighters are a public safety asset. And we have, first, the hardest thing to get for any city in America. We have a great police chief who has the trust of our people, and he has the trust of the force. When you don't have the trust, you can't build the very best. So we have that, but what do we need to do as a city to make sure that we are clear about the goals of supporting that, so that we can reduce some of our call times, so that we can make sure that when your business or your family calls 911, somebody comes. And right now, that is a bigger challenge than it needs to be, and I worry could send us in the wrong direction. But I think we can turn that around. The third issue that got me into the race, and I think as we have this conversation around the direction of our city and our future, is our relationship with the region. The tallest point in the county is Gainer Ridge at Radnor Lake. That is named for my great-grandfather. He was an engineer, worked with a lot of neighbors there, and loved our community. Most people who live there don't care that it's a city park or a state park. It's a state park. They just care that they have a park. And I think most people in Nashville, when they see what feels like a kind of a performative war, that frankly, and I know we have a lot of friends in the media here, that frankly all sides are ginning up in a really unproductive way. I think most people in Nashville kind of think, hey, what's the problem? And how do I find the people to bring to my team to get a solution? I'll give you a couple of examples of that. The Tennessee Promise. That is something that this state uniquely has. We did that without raising taxes. We made sure that every child could have 2 years of free community college, and no other state in the country did that. What did the city do? The city came in and said, there's still some gaps in funding. How do we fill that gap so that more of our graduates can go on to have 2 years of free community college? That's not a Republican or Democrat issue. That's a problem that we figured out how to work together and solve. This governor's budget made Tennessee the first state in the country to pay for diapers for every baby on TennCare. And you might say, Alice, why are you talking about diapers? Well, if you are a mother who is not able to buy diapers, and your child ends up with a diaper rash or a urinary tract infection, they didn't sleep that night. That makes it hard for you to go to work the next day, and it makes it hard for you to make hard decisions around what bills you're going to pay. So the state looked at it and said, gosh, we have more claims medically for diapers, urinary tract infections. Why don't we figure out how to solve that? So Tennessee's the first state in the country to do that, right? So that's a problem for 230,000 babies in the state, but it's a problem for about 30,000 babies right here. So walk across the aisle and say, how do we take that and solve it? The last I will give as an example that will come up here in the special session, and happy to talk about that if that comes up in questions, is the mental health beds in our state. We don't have enough. We have 7 million people and only about 600 state-funded mental health beds. So Chairman Sapicki, if not in the special session in the next session, will introduce legislation to create more mental health beds around the state. We see that. We see that in homelessness. We see that in crime. And we see that in our community saying there is not a bed for me to send my loved one to. I've got to send them to Nevada or Utah because they have beds and we don't. That's not a problem just for Nashville. That's a problem for the entire state. And our most effective funding streams for healthcare are state and federal dollars. So don't turn it into a war, turn it into a way to find a solution. The last thing I think that we will need to work on as a city and as a region is making sure for our longtime residents that we are matching the cost of growth at the site of growth. What does that mean? It means that people around the county frequently feel like things are growing and they're being handed the bill. And so I think that there are ways that we can rethink that. There are state laws that have been in place since 2006 that we're on the wrong side of. I actually think we've got more regional mayors who agree with us and that we can come up with a solution that benefits our people in Davidson County, but also brings the region with us. One last issue around economic development, and which I know is probably particularly important in this room. What does that say, 3 minutes? Okay, you guys, you're almost done. Hang on. It is this issue of restoring trust. So when I worked for Governor Haslam on the top to bottom review of economic development, what we found is government had made itself so complicated. It had gotten in its own way, and that's something that happens. It's well-intentioned people all kind of thinking about how to organize things that work for them, and not necessarily how they interact with the government. So an aspect of restoring trust, I think, is making sure that we are transparent, that people feel like they understand and they've been communicated with when we make hard decisions. And that we can, I think that we can do that in a very unique way, because I'm not a creature of the systems that built where we are today. And I think we can take a fresh look to say, is there a way we can do that better? So in closing, I think that this election is around the vision of Nashville. I think that we can choose to be a city that welcomes visitors and new neighbors, but insists at every turn that our lives are safe, that our city's finances are strong, and that our kids can get an excellent education. I think we can choose, and I think I've shown that, and our family has shown that with Radnor Lake, or with my work on Fort Negley. I think that we can choose to become a city where conservation can live alongside commerce. But most importantly, I believe that we can choose to become a city that transcends political tribalism and works together to find solutions for our region's biggest challenges. That, I believe, is the choice we have in this election, and I hope that you will consider supporting us, and I welcome all of the questions to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for your comments this morning. I do have the cards here with some questions. The first question here is on taxes. We recently had a historic tax increase. How do you plan to keep Nashville fiscally sound? I guess we'll start with Freddie and we'll then go to Alice and then reverse it the next question.
All right, Lee, thanks, and it sounds like everybody can hear me okay. You don't just talk about taxes. That's part of how this works. You have to have both sides of the conversation understood. We collect taxes specifically in order to prepare for a budget, and the thing that is most important when we have these conversations is, why do we need this revenue in the first place? And that means conversations about sidewalks and schools. That means conversations about Metro employees, specifically first responders and teachers. The support staff who make all of what we do possible, the civil servants, all of those things. So if we are transparent about the types of investments we expect to make, and we say, here is what we anticipate the cost to be, then that is why the revenue conversation matters. The way we got to a 34% property tax rate increase, unfortunately, in the middle of a pandemic, had to do with decisions that got made prior to that. I still remember sitting at home with my new infant daughter, missing the state of Metro, where we heard a declaration of no new taxes. Well, unfortunately, that came with a lot of other volatility and disruption within Metro that left us without some of the other supporting revenue sources, and we started digging a hole where we started having to pay for government by asset sales. Now, over the past few years on the Metro Council, we have made some important strides, some of them with the full support of the mayor's office. We started overhauling last term how we dealt with tax increment financing and making sure that we weren't just using economic development tools to do things that the tool wasn't intended for. More recently, we've created a fund balance policy, which means neither the mayor nor council can as easily dip into what is supposed to be a rainy day fund, and we have also watched that rainy day fund replenish itself so that going forward, we should be far less likely to have unwelcome visits from the Tennessee Comptroller's Office. But I'll tell you what, the Tennessee Comptroller's Office came to Nashville and said very definitively, your choices are we raise revenues to the level that it is appropriate, or we start taking over your checkbook. And we have taken important steps since that time to make sure that never happens again, and I'm proud to have been a part of that.
I think he gave us a third choice too, which is how do we run the city living within our means? And our means are considerable and they have been growing. So sometimes that means making decisions about what is most important to fund, what are must-haves and what are nice-to-haves. I have taken Grover Norquist's group, the American Taxpayer Protection Pledge. A reporter who may be in this room said to me, Alice, that's a really extreme position. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that it is an extreme position. Governor Haslam did too. The Improve Act, which was changing the way that we finance our roads, that was American Taxpayer Protection Act compliant. It is about centering the decisions on the taxpayers and saying that a city growing revenues that we see, 6 and 7% a year, should be able to operate within those means. Now, granted, as Councilman O'Connell has said, we started in about 2008. You can see the shift that we took, and some of that was based on the time period that we were in, but we never course corrected. For about 15 years, we have consistently spent significantly more than we have brought in, and we have consistently not, until recently, taken a position that said, some days it may rain, right? And you have to have a rainy day fund to be ready for the rain. So I do want to applaud the council for following what are GASB best practices in making sure that we do have a fund balance. So how are you going to pay for it? If you're not going to raise taxes of current property owners here, how are you going to get the work done that a growing city needs to do? I think this is a place where understanding the history of what got us here and being able to articulate a conservative position with our partners in the General Assembly and with other regional mayors is really unique. So why, when we think about the rate that we receive of sales tax here, business owners around here, the city says we're only keeping 80% of state tax revenues, we're only keeping 20%. And 80% of that is going to the state. It is a conservative position to match the cost of a service at the site of a service. And that ratio was shifted in 2002 when the state was in an austerity budget position. We remember that, right? We remember families being disenrolled from TennCare. We remember the state and ourselves not knowing how to figure out how to charge sales tax on internet purchases when the sales was pretty new. Well, now the state is in a position that our partners in Memphis and Hamilton County and Knox County and the Tennessee Municipal League, I think, agree with and need a partner to articulate this well. The state is no longer in an austerity position, and it is a conservative position to shift back to what that ratio was in 2002 to help finance some of the work here. The other is something that I alluded to before. A lot of our mayors, Joe Carr down in Rutherford County, he just had to raise his property taxes 16%. That's tough, right? A lot of that is that he is like us on the wrong side of the 2006 law, the County Powers Act. It doesn't allow us to charge impact fees, but our neighbor Rogers Anderson in Williamson County, he can't because he got there a little bit sooner than we did. So I think frequently this question of how are you going to think as a chief revenue officer for the city and maximize every dollar that is available, that doesn't necessarily always have the answer of going back to our families and raising their taxes. And so I think it's just a little bit of a different approach. Growing the pie on the revenue side, thinking about all available options.
Next question. Even if every unemployed individual were to fill the current 63,000 job openings in our region, there would still be a shortage of nearly 32,000 workers. This room needs workforce now. What's your strategy to upskill and reskill the talent that is needed for this room? We'll start with Alex.
Well, I think it is continuing to invest, like I mentioned before, in the gaps where if we have 2 years of trade technical community college through the Tennessee Promise, we do have Tennessee Reconnect, but it's also getting smart about nearly $750 million surplus of TANF funds, the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, was put back into the market. So it's starting to say, if I have a gap in my workforce and I have the business community, it is not K-12, it is K to J. We need you to be active in our schools and in our school system to help us identify what the skills are that we need and where we're falling short. And we need you to be a critical friend in making sure that we're producing graduates who are career and college ready.
Lee, thanks. There we go. This is one of the more important questions because I think ultimately economic development and workforce development go hand in hand. And in the past, these have been key functions of the mayor's office. And I think I saw Matt Wiltshire in here earlier, he may still be here. And he's worked exactly on this of making sure that the unemployment rate in Nashville after an external economic shock drops to a point where we are setting national records, and it goes hand in hand with how we do this. I think the mayor's office should now focus on an office of opportunity that works across a 4-year period to do youth opportunity, where we're setting up not just a summer job, but a lifetime of networking opportunities that prepare people for lifetimes of success, that workforce development initiatives like Nashville Grad Have a Home, and an already funded long-range economic plan go, and that we have a 4-year focus on combining workforce development with economic development. We also have a small business recovery fund that is going to be helping people get here. But Lee, earlier this year, our area median income crept up over $100,000, and this is also connected to the challenge we're going to face on affordable housing and cost of living in the city, and the mayor's going to have to tackle that as well.
Next question. What do you see that our teachers struggle with, and how do you plan to help them aside from pay raises?
So this is, I will say, there are 2 things that I've heard distinctly from teachers, and they are cost of living. I have a teacher friend who has been looking to become a homeowner. She is in her early 30s, and she is stuck in that hole where she can't qualify for income-based affordable housing because she earns just too much, but she can't find anything in the market that hits a level where she could actually qualify for a mortgage. And as we've watched interest rates creep up, we know that monthly payments have crept up along with them. Teacher pay remains a priority. Mayor Cooper did something that we should all applaud, which is ensure that Metro teachers are the best paid in the state of Tennessee. That is a goal that I would hope to hang on to, and that will be precipitously difficult under a no tax pledge that requires changes in state law to find additional revenue sources to replace. I think the other big thing is support staff. We know that teachers have been asked to do far more than teach in classrooms. Our daughter's teachers have seen this. We did an incredibly important step alongside that teacher pay piece on the Metro Council to ensure that support staff pay rates also went up. They are some of the lowest paid employees in Metro. We've got school bus drivers there. We're going to continue to have to make important investments in teachers. And then the final piece is facilities. Just over the past few weeks, we've opened Goodlettsville Elementary School and the new James Lawson High School in Bellevue. We've got a capital program we're going to have to pursue to ensure that the learning environments are also teaching environments that can be sustained.
Well, I think this gets back to also the workforce development issue. We have too many situations where we're not able to attract and retain enough teachers. I served on the founding board here of Teach for America, which was an initiative by Mayor Carl Dean, where Nashville then, around our education and our education system, said, let's be the best and bring the best ideas here. And let's support those new ideas. I love this story. I think a lot of people probably know it, about Carl Dean going to see Wendy Kopp, the founder of Teach for America. And she said, you know, we'll put you on the list. You can have Teach for America in 3 years from now. And he said, Wendy, I have 4 years as a mayor. We got to move up the list. And so what did he do? He went out to the philanthropists in this city who ponied up the funds that we needed to put Nashville on the map to be a magnet for talent for teachers. So I think it is saying we want the best teachers here and we want to support them. It's also looking at some of our neighbors. Many of our neighbors, if you or your spouse or your friend has a master's degree in special education and you come and say, I want to be a teacher here in Metro for special ed, elementary special ed, one of our biggest shortage areas. Right now, for you to do that in Wilson County, it costs you about $300 a month for 10 months to take the classes you need to do and get going. Here, it costs you about $10,000. So I think we've also got to look around where our neighbors are doing to say, how are we recruiting career changers? Because teachers need enough other teachers so that they are not pulled away. Secondly, we've got to look at safety for our teachers. We have to put out a help wanted sign. We can't fail at not getting SROs if we don't try. We've got to put a help wanted sign out that says we want to make sure there is a good guy there so that teachers also feel that they don't need to worry about their personal safety alone. And then I think last, we've got to make sure that the dollars, every dollar possible, is getting to the site of the school where that teacher is so that they feel like they are able to make decisions, they are able to work with their classroom, their classroom is well resourced.
Thank you. There are several questions in here. How do you start the conversation with the state and build a successful bridge where we can work together? Alice, it's your turn.
Sure, yeah, well, I don't know if I'm starting a conversation. I think I'm continuing a career of being an individual who is able to work productively with the state. I'll give you a story, because I know that there's this world that says, well, she's not going to stand up for Nashville. Absolutely not. I can think about, in government, if you are a little bit brave, you can get so much done. I think about a program that reported to me at the state, the flood insurance program, the National Flood Insurance Program. Really wonky stuff, but I think something like $30 billion of Tennessee properties are covered by it, so people in this room, you probably care if we are compliant with the federal flood insurance program. A law was passed one year by Senator Nicely that took the entire state out of compliance. So there's two ways to approach coming up with a fix to that. One would be to embarrass or shame Senator Nicely and to take an adversarial approach. The other would be the way that I approached it, the daughter and the granddaughter of a farmer, a person who I've gone hunting with Senator Nicely, is to go and talk to him and to say, you know, I know that you disagree fundamentally with the purpose of flood insurance, and I know that your challenge here is you don't want planters on your farm in Strawberry Plains. But what I've done is walked our farm on the Cumberland River, where we have about 100 acres in the floodplain, and I've talked to the farmers there, and we're going to put 3 more words back into that law. That's going to make the feds happy. that farmers know best, they know what they're gonna do. We're gonna get it done without embarrassing you, with coming up with a solution and getting the state to a place that's good for business owners and property. So I think that taking that kind of a collaborative, what's the principle, how do we solve the problem, has really been a hallmark. We still solved the problem. We didn't shy away from the problem, but we did it in a way that was searching for a solution and not for an agenda or a notch on our belt of winning a fight.
I think to Alice's point, we've got, I think for both of us, this is an opportunity to continue a conversation that has been there. And I think there are actually people at the state level who I've already talked to that are eager to see this as a moment for resetting and recalibrating. I'll say, I think we were probably the only family in the 80s in Richmond, West End, that had a cattle chute in the driveway because my dad used to be in veterinary services for the U.S. Department of Agriculture here. And so I actually got to tour a lot of our county region, watching my dad try to eradicate brucellosis from cattle herds across Middle Tennessee. My mom grew up in Dixon, Tennessee. I'm a Nashvilleian by birth and by choice now, but I know that we are also Tennesseans. I know that the people that my mom grew up with are Tennesseans. I know that the cattle farmers that my dad met the whole time we were growing up are all Tennesseans. It's a good thing to be able to identify with that as Nashville, we have a set of shared values it's important to express, but that as Tennesseans, it's easy to come together because everybody has a story. And that is something I heard directly from a Republican over the weekend as we started to look toward a future where we do this together. I think the experience that I've had regionally over the past decade working with city and county mayors helps the 10-county region go express a set of shared priorities easily. I think working with other big city mayors is an incredibly important opportunity as well. And I do think that there are people here in Nashville and there are people at the state that want to see this more successful as a partnership with state partners. And I'm actually very optimistic about the opportunity to reset and recalibrate.
I have a number of questions here regarding affordability. As more and more Nashvilleians are leaving the city due to affordability, what's your plan to ensure locals can stay and thrive in the city they grew up in? Freddie, we'll start with you.
So just a couple of years ago in 2021, Mayor Cooper initiated an affordable housing task force. And so there's a mix of good news and hard news. The hard news is coming from the fact that we do see that there's incredible pressure as more people move to Nashville with higher incomes. There's a gap that's open that hits the area median income piece. But the good news is that most of the key recommendations in that Affordable Housing Task Force report are underway and in progress to the tune where this budget that the Metro Council just approved and that one of us will inherit starting in October, running through June 30th, will be the first time in this 8-year period where we've watched the gap close. We've got enough affordable housing units in the pipeline and funded through the Barnes Fund and other tools in that Affordable Housing Task Force report that we will start to see a drop in the need. We're finally hitting supply where it needs to be. But if you look at total household costs, raw cost of housing with rent or mortgage and utilities and transportation, they are on par. If we can help households across Nashville lower their household cost of transportation by reducing commutes that have to do an expensive double fee, by coming into downtown for every trip that comes out, building the emerging network of community transit centers that should have been constructed far earlier, taking advantage of the near-term approach that we go public transit left in our desks as recently as 2017 that we haven't completed. There is a huge way in which our housing and transit policies remain together and need to. As mayor, I expect to make sure that those policies are linked. And then again, it comes all the way back to the conversation about opportunity. We have to make sure that our young people have opportunities, that our workforce is taking advantage of new changes. We have developed a rich knowledge economy with Oracle and Amazon and even AllianceBernstein, even though it is a finance company, it is also underneath a technology company. We have good news in that Fisk University and TSU are seeing enrollment increases at a time when we are seeing workforce needs emerge, and we're watching Belmont and Lipscomb join Vanderbilt and continue to grow. We've got housing challenges at some of our colleges and universities at this point, and Vanderbilt has been a participant in that for their grad student population. We need to make sure that all of those things fit together: transit, housing, workforce, and economic development.
Well, I think we made our city less affordable when we raised taxes, right? You hear small business owners that moved across the county line because a triple net lease in Rutherford County is about a third of what it is at a retailer mall on the Davidson County side. So first around affordability is recognizing that there is a cost to every decision that we make, and how do we make sure that those costs are not, that we're operating within our means and not passing them all along. The second, I think, for families around affordability is childcare and education. So to keep our families that you are recruiting here, that are working at your businesses here, living in Davidson County, being a part of Davidson County, means summoning the will that this city has had before. This is the city that built what is now Bright Horizons, right? Captain Keyshawn, Bob Keyshawn, who was Captain Kangaroo, Honey Alexander, Lamar Alexander, they built workplace daycare centers. How do we think through in our economic development strategy, in our permitting and our zoning strategy, how we're making sure that there is a place for high quality childcare? Are we getting in the way with some of our regulations? Do we need to step up and think about what the spaces are that children can be cared for in our city and support that? And then I think for our schools, we cannot operate with this recruiting attitude that says, well, we're going to bring your businesses here, but your families who work there are probably going to go live in Wilson County because their schools are better. We have to reject that. We have to say, how, if we know that we've got great schools in our city, if we know that we've got waiting lists for some of those great schools, instead of continuing to believe that parents will stay here, what do we need to do to get busy to build more of the seats that parents want? How do we reorient ourselves so that the cost that parents and families here are saying, I want my taxpayers to pay for a school that I want to go to? And I think that is a big part of affordability for our families.
I believe that's all the time we have for questions today. So, Ralph, I'll let you come. Thank you both for your participation today.
Lee, thanks for that moderation of the conversation. Just 3 points I'd like to make in conclusion. First of all, I want to say thank you to the candidates. This is a very compressed campaign period, and they have spent time with us this morning to go into depth, and I think that's evidence of the willingness to collaborate and partner, and thank you all for this time. The second point I'd like to make is that we are very proud to represent you with our public partners. But nothing takes the place of your face-to-face conversation with these public partners. I really want to encourage you. These are not bashful people. They are fun people to be with. Please make it a point to support your candidates, to contact and converse with your public officials. It both gives evidence of your willingness to participate and partner, and when we do represent you, and we have processes to discern your desires, but when we do represent you, they can attach faces to that representation. So I really want to encourage you to make the effort and devote the time to connect with our public officials. And then finally, I heard reference to the fact that this will be our 10th mayor, and I realize that we'll have the opportunity to work with 5 of those 10 mayors, not over the course of the 60 years or so entirely. But the fact of the matter is that Nashville is where it is today with expanding opportunity for its residents, for the people of Nashville, because of the collaboration of public and private sector. And so we are very pleased that these candidates have committed to that public and private partnership, and we look forward to that. So keep in mind, we have a plan, we have guidance, affordability, livability, education, transportation, and connections are priorities that you've established, and you've heard these candidates today referring to all of those key priorities. So thank you all for devoting this time. Please encourage people to vote. We had about 100,000 out of nearly 500,000 registered voters participate in the first election. We need to encourage people to be a part of making this crucial decision going forward. Make that opportunity available to your employees. So candidates, once again, thank you for this time.